Alright guys, welcome back to Keeping Up with the X-Men. Today I'm finally going to talk about Jean Grey. Now we have started a new storyline in the Jean Grey books. This is issue 8 and the cover is pretty good. I'm not hating it. I like it. It's kind of interestingly symbolic. This is called Trapped in the Mind of the White Queen. And you can see the White Queen kind of shattered, and she's in like the color of it gives me the idea of the crystal form, the diamond form or whatever. And I also like that she's holding the birdcage, and the birdcage is very obviously that's the phoenix inside of the birdcage. And that brings us to what's going on in the book, because that all is pretty symbolic of what's happening. Now when this starts, Jean Grey is standing in front of these... Jean Grey is standing outside, and she's met by all of those weird clone girls. That was the weird clone girls of Emma Frost. Well, anyways, this is around the time of the Astonishing X-Men run, if I can remember somewhere in there. I remember the image of it. This all takes place during the time that Jean Grey came back. At the time she was in Hong Kong, she came back to discover that Scott was with Emma. Look, there was a lot going on, but as far as I can remember, they weren't like together, but Emma was trying to help him, and then it turned out looking like a weird fetish thing, but at the same time, Emma kind of did have her own things going on. Look, X-Men, okay? Here's what's going on. For anybody that didn't read this, and I even read this, and I'm still kind of a little lost in points, because, man, it was so long ago that I read through what they're skimming back to, you would be lost. But in a way, it is an interesting way to show you kind of the history points of the X-Men. Well, anyways, what we're actually doing here is we are in the mind of Jean Grey. So none of this that we see is real. Now, Wolverine comes down from the sky and crashes into Beast. And I can't remember exactly what is going on here, but none of it is real. Jean Grey sees her reflection in the window and knows why people are talking to her as if she was actually Jean Grey. But she doesn't have very long to look at herself, because the longer she stays here, the more that she contaminates the memory is going to fight her. Certain defenses within the mind of Emma Frost are going to battle her. They're trying to get rid of her. So Student kind of goes crazy and breaks the window right next to her and screaming about riot and everything. And we go to the outside where you can see that Jean Grey is trying to hold Emma Frost in place, keep her sedated basically, and allow the other Jean Grey to enter her mind. Now this is where things get kind of complicated. In the book before this, for a while now, Jean Grey has been answering herself. And what I mean by that is that there are every now and then there's the moment where Jean Grey will kind of say something in her own mind, and then she'll answer it in her own mind. And for a long time there, it seemed like that wasn't a weird thing. It seemed like that was just kind of a thing that was happening. And sometimes we see this in comics where a character will be like, oh, I was so stupid. Yeah, I know, you really shouldn't have done that kind of thing. Well, come to figure out, Jean Grey wasn't actually answering herself. I mean, she kind of was. Going to Doctor Strange, she discovered that she is actually being haunted by the former Jean Grey, that the spirit of the former Jean Grey is there with her, inside of her. And what it did was it took control of young Jean Grey's body. So the original Jean Grey is in the body of young Jean Grey and has transferred the young Jean Grey's consciousness into the White Queen's mind to search for something. And that is what is going on here. Now, Jean Grey is told, hey, as long as you stay here, this is going to get no better. You need to go right now. Okay? You need to go, because what we're doing, we're looking for something specific. You need to go Get out of there. So she starts proceeding through the school. Now, once she gets into the school, she runs into Zorn. And at the time, Zorn was Magneto, and Magneto recognizes that she should not be here. So while she's in the school, Zorn attacks her. And this is where things get kind of even more crazy, because some of the students actually jump in to help her, because by the memory of this point, now her own mind is kind of confused, because the memory did not know that this was Magneto. At least these characters did not know that this was Magneto. So now she's got kind of some help, and she makes her way towards She makes her way towards a house. Now, this house is where she's supposed to be going. But before she can get into the house, she sees this giant, scary, ridiculous sentinel thing. And it is ridiculous. This is one of the sentinels that was used to destroy Genosha. And it's scary. It is legitimately a frightening beast of a machine. And she is told immediately, go in the house, stop wasting time, get in the house. This thing is not a good thing. It will completely destroy you. So she runs into the house and starts going through the house. She's trying to find where she's supposed to be inside of this house, what she's supposed to be looking for. When she goes through this door, pretty violently, might I add, and she falls onto quite the scene. Emma Frost is sitting with Scott, and she is in the Dark Phoenix outfit. And this is a very famous looking scene. This is a very famous scene taken out of context in the X-Men, and I'm not going to go through all the dilemma of trying to explain it here, but basically, I like her response to it. And this is one of those things I was talking about with Jean Grey when I reviewed the X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue books, saying that when she was put into the costume of Madeline Pryor, it should have went all the way. She should have had the ridiculous underboob costume, and the reason is because of the way that this Jean Grey reacts to these situations. I love her responses when she sees them. She's like, ew, and immediately the characters are like, oh, don't bother, Scott. That's not actually Jean. And then all of a sudden Emma starts kind of fighting with herself, or this is kind of memory Emma, or it is Emma. It's hard to tell because we're in like the psychedelic mind frame thing that X-Men psychic battles do. So this could very well be Emma, or a reflection of Emma, the main line of protection, because it's like, it's not actually Jean. And then all of a sudden she says, well, wait, it is Jean, kind of Jean. And then Jean's response to this situation that she's come into is, yeah, no, I'm not his stupid wife. I couldn't care less about your gross, sexy party. I love young Jean Grey. It's so ridiculous. She's such a great character. They use her to attack these weird situations, awful costumes, and just all around ridiculousness of the continuity that is laid down through the Jean Grey character when she gets to attack X-Men at its present level. And she's like, okay, yeah, whatever is going on in here, I don't even care. Like, this is something I just, you know what? I'm ready to be done with this. And now that Scott, this is not Scott, this is the weird defense mechanism Scott, knows that she doesn't belong there, he goes nuts on her. He starts doing the optic blasts and everything, and man, I love Jean Grey. I love that they're finally handling her powers. For years, when we were growing up, the animated series did her no justice whatsoever, and a lot of people my age, and just to put this out here, I'm 33, a lot of people my age got into the X-Men specifically for one reason. They saw the animated series. And a lot of people now are getting into the X-Men through the movies. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has to start somewhere, and if that's where you guys started, then that's wonderful. That's your own thing. But Man, I'm telling you, Jean, I love how well she's handled. Scott just pours on the optic blast and she's done with him. She literally whips him across the room while holding a kinetic barrier that stopped the force of his entire blast. And if you've been sticking with my show, guys, you know that I have respect for Scott and just how powerful those beams can get, just how destructive Scott can really be. But let me tell you something. Jean Grey is one of my all-time, she might even be my all-time favorite X-Men. There are times that she stands well above Wolverine. And I love the potential of Jean Grey. I love what she can accomplish, what she can do, and just the outrageous stories that surround her. Jean Grey has developed so much, and I love the way they're handling her powers. I love the way that they're no longer dumbing her down. She is one of the most powerful mutants ever put in X-Men, hands down, period. And she gets to show it off. She's able to block all of Scott's power while at the same time winging him across the room and taking him out in a single hit, to where she then goes back in to talk to Emma. And at the same time, the older Jean is telling her, you're wasting time. There's something here. I can hear it. It sounds something like a heartbeat. Look around. There's something in this room right here. Something hidden. We need to find it. And she kind of looks around, and Emma goes into her diamond form so she can't be messed with. At least this is one of those things. Like I said, this is the psychedelic weirdness of going through mind stuff in the X-Men. This might be Emma, it might be the defense of Emma, but one way or another, Emma's power is that when she's in the diamond form, things like the telepathy do not affect her. You can't read her mind, you can't take things from her mind, it blocks you. And it takes Jean a minute to hear it takes young Jean a minute to kind of figure out what original Jean is kind of talking about. When she finds it, Scott has a Phoenix Force inside of him. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I have a theory as to what's going on. She breaks that Phoenix Force out and kind of takes it into herself. And when she does that, we are left with quite the crazy page here when Jean Grey, in the outside world, the real world, bursts into Phoenix Flame. I don't know for sure, but I'm curious if we are preparing Jean for what's coming, because they keep talking about the Phoenix and everything else, which I've been wondering about that, if the Phoenix is going to be how Jean Grey, the older, real Jean Grey, I shouldn't say real because they're the same people, but the other Jean Grey is coming back. We know this. And I wonder if part of her coming back deals with the Phoenix Force. And I'm curious if the Phoenix Force is locked in specific members, if there are still fragments from the Avengers vs. X-Men thing that took place when the Phoenix was broken into 5 and given to different people, or it might have just that Emma held on to a small part of it all this time. I don't know. One way or another, she has part of the Phoenix power right now, I'm guessing, because this last page really makes it look like she discovered part of the Phoenix Force, because she is just lit up like crazy. It's awesome. I'm in love with it. I love it. I'm sorry. I love Jean Grey, and I love to see the Phoenix coming back. I realize that the Phoenix is this dangerous monstrosity. It never ends well, but I love the Phoenix. It's such a big deal. I always look forward to seeing it. I always love to see it in the comics, what it represents, what it can do, and I love when Jean Grey is in control of it. Jean Grey, I don't care. Jean Grey is the Phoenix. Put it in a million other entities, and it will never matter. Jean Grey is the Phoenix. She's one of my all-time favorite characters, and I loved this book. I tried to go over this book as quickly, but at the same time leaving out as much detail as I could while giving as much detail as I could and not explaining certain key elements. Like if you want to go back and read kind of where this era is taking place, I believe this is during the Astonishing X-Men run. I can't remember for sure, and I wish I would have looked it back up because I honestly, I feel like I'm wrong. I feel like Astonishing X-Men might be too early, or maybe it was just after this, where the Astonishing X-Men ran. I'm sorry, I really should have looked it up before I did this, but I try to leave out as much information as I can while adding as much information as I can so that there's a purpose for you reading this book as well. And if you're not reading Jean Grey, I think Jean Grey is one of the good X-Men titles. I'm reading everything, so of course you will always hear my opinions on the entire overall arc of X-Men as we go along, and I will not be ashamed to tell you when I feel like I'm wasting money on a book, but at the same time I will tell you when I believe you need to be spending your money on a book. And Jean Grey, maybe I'm biased, maybe it's because I really, really love the character, but I really like the Jean Grey book. The standalone book is a solid title, and I think this one was really good as well. I love the whole crazy mind bleepery craziness that happens in these psychic battles, and I love how much I can analyze and get lost and even confuse myself in it. I love stuff like that. So, you are now all caught up with Jean Grey. Later on, guys.